Welcome back to the Dershow. Everybody seems to love law school, legal, constitutional analysis of controversial current subjects. So we got a tremendous response from last night's show, in which I went through all the possible ways in which Donald Trump could be elected president for a third term. Um, um, I'm going to read the letters later, but I'm going to start with a letter because today is April Fool's Day, and it really is an April Fool's letter. So I was going to celebrate April Fool's Day by reading it. Can the president announce that he is now a female named Donna Trump and is now running to be the first woman president? And he isn't precluded because he's no longer Donald Trump. April Fool, go to school, tell the teacher she's a fool. No, it won't happen. President Trump's going to serve 2 terms, and I hope. I mean, if his health is good, he's not such a young man, but he's not going to run for a third term. He's not going to run for a third term because he's going to decide not to run for a third term. And if he were to, it would be tied up in litigation for months and months and months, and the Supreme Court would eventually probably decide against him. We can't be sure, but I think it's not going to happen. It's his April Fool's joke. I mean, he's very good at that. He baits the media, and you'll notice it took the signal thing off the front page and put his agenda on the front page, which is what he's so good at. Okay, not a lot of news to focus on before we get to the subject matter at hand. So it's a choice. It's a choice. It's an extreme choice. What do we do with Luigi Mangione, the Attorney General of the United States? Pam Bondi says it's simple. We subject him to capital punishment. We convict him. It's going to be a pretty easy case to convict him on. And then we execute him and bury him in an unmarked grave somewhere. All right, that's one approach. We'll talk about that. The other approach comes from, you guessed it, California. They've introduced legislation in California to name a law in honor of this first-degree murderer. It's a law which would prevent insurance companies from delaying. It's probably a good law. It's a law I'd probably support. I'm not going to support a law named after a cold-blooded murderer, but, I think probably as much as anything else, it reflects the enormous divisions in our country. And by the way, these are divisions about Luigi Mangione aren't even divisions that separate Republicans from Democrats or right from left. It really represents a different kind of division. Many of the people who have been lionizing this defendant and who have been praising him and want to name the law after him, they're from all different walks of life. They're conservative Republicans, they're liberal Democrats, they're people who hate what insurance companies have done to healthcare. And the insurance companies have managed to alienate people from all sides of the political spectrum, including me and including my son Elon. We've had our arguments with insurance companies and health insurance companies over the years. It's one of the few areas that I have not represented. I have declined cases involving big insurance companies and big pharma and others who I don't think are necessarily serving the best interests of the American people. Now, big pharma does, of course, it creates fantastic drugs, so overprices them, but creates fantastic drugs that save lives. I've had friends whose lives have been saved, so I don't want to badmouth all of big pharma, but I wish they would be a little bit more reasonable about pricing and take a little bit out of their own pockets and profits and put it in the public interest. Insurance companies, it's a very hard question. What do you do? Do you go to the Canada model where everybody has insurance, but nobody has good health care? Or do you stick with the American model where people who can afford it have superb health care? But even people who can't afford it if they're not at the lowest possible level, they have pretty good health care. Is there any way of bringing everybody from the bottom up and giving them better health care? We've been through all these debates with Obamacare and various other variations on universal health care, on near universal health care. The one thing that's clear is whatever you might feel about it, you don't go around shooting a man who's the head of a health insurance company in the back, a man who has children. We don't know anything about his personal views. He could be the nicest guy in the world. He could be something short of that. We don't know. But the American way is not to walk up to him stealthily and just shoot him in the back and murder him, and then to have T-shirts made of him and women particularly, but men too, but women particularly oogling him, and now this person in California wants to name a law after him. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. I think wiser minds will prevail. The law may very well be put on the ballot. It's actually a referendum, and it's an important referendum. If it has the name Luigi Mangione, it's going to lose. But if it takes his name off, maybe it will prevail. And I think I haven't read the statute. I just read about it. It seems like a pretty good law. Well, what about Pam Bondi? As you know, she's a friend, and I like her, and I know her, and I talk to her from time to time, and she seeks my advice, and I've sought her advice. We were co-counsel for Donald Trump in the first impeachment, and she announced today that she's instructed the U.S. attorneys to seek the death penalty. First of all, you have to ask, how do you get the death penalty? This crime took place in New York, right near my house, in New York. And New York doesn't have the death penalty. And so if this guy were tried as an ordinary murderer in New York, he couldn't get the death penalty. Death penalty has been abolished in New York legislatively. So what happened is the federal government essentially took over the case because there is the death penalty federally. And he can get the death penalty federally, even though he's committed a crime in a jurisdiction where there's no death penalty. The Supreme Court and other courts have so held that that the supremacy clause prevails, and if he's committed a federal offense, and everything's a federal offense these days, but killing somebody for purposes of you fill it in is going to be a federal offense. So he'll be tried. He's in federal custody now. He'll be tried as a federal defendant, and Pam Bondi has instructed the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Justice Department, everybody under her, to seek the death penalty. That doesn't mean they'll get it. Generally, you need unanimity to get the death penalty, and there are often one holdout or two holdouts who say, "Look, we're prepared to convict him for murder, but we're not prepared to give him the death penalty." Particularly in a case like this, where he's young, no prior record. He did it out of crazy political motives, but you conceivably could get one juror or two jurors holding out, and that's all you need. He doesn't get the death penalty, he then gets life with no possibility of parole. As the most likely outcome, he dies in prison instead of by lethal injection, just by natural causes. Should he get the death penalty? Look, I'm an opponent of the death penalty. I've been an opponent of the death penalty since I was 12 years old, 11 years old. I signed a petition in favor of saving the lives of the Rosenbergs. Remember them? No, you're too young to remember them, but they were two communists who lived in New York, who were accused of giving atomic secrets. They really weren't atomic secrets. The Soviet Union had already gotten the atomic secrets from a guy named Klaus Fuchs. And Mrs. Rosenberg probably didn't have anything to do with the selling the secrets, but they decided to impose the death penalty on both of them. The theory being that Julius Rosenberg, the man who was the criminal, and he's guilty, there's no doubt about that. We now have wiretaps and intelligence, everything that proves beyond any doubt that he was giving what he believed were atomic secrets. They were worthless, but what he believed were atomic secrets to the Soviet Union, but she wasn't. But they sentenced her to death on the theory that they couldn't get him to talk. They couldn't get him to indicate who his contacts were in America, who else was spying, perhaps, against the United States and for the Soviet Union. They couldn't get him to talk. He was a committed, zealous communist. And they figured if they sentence his wife to death, and they offer to save his wife, if he talks, he'll talk. They were wrong. She was as committed a communist as he was. She told him not to talk. And even though she was not guilty, she ended up being executed. I've debated the Rosenberg case over and over again. I think I first met Woody Allen and Mia Farrow came to hear me debate the Rosenberg son about whether the death penalty was justified and whether they were guilty or not. So my position is this: I'm against the death penalty. I've always been against the death penalty. I have my old debate cards from when I was a 14 or 15-year-old debater in high school, and I have my card debating against capital punishment. I spelled capital wrong, but I was a terrible speller. But I've been against the death penalty. I wrote the first opinion in the Supreme Court against the death penalty and suggesting that it might be unconstitutional when I was a law clerk. And that's been my memo to Justice Goldberg has been now published. So I've been a long-term opponent to the death penalty, but I can say this: I don't want Luigi Mangione to get the death penalty, but if there is anybody who deserves the death penalty, he's among them. I mean, if you're not opposed to the death penalty, if you say the worst people should get the death penalty, he has to be considered in that category. No, he's not Hamas. He didn't kill dozens and dozens of people and rape people. No, he doesn't have a long, long criminal record. But what he did, stalking somebody and then walking up to him and shooting him in the back, if anything, deserves the death penalty, if there should be a death penalty. That probably does. And so if a jury imposes the death penalty, we don't know whether it will or not, because, the case will be tried still, even though it's a federal case, will be tried in New York in front of a federal jury in New York. And jurors from New York tend to be somewhat more liberal than jurors in other parts of the country. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if the jury did not unanimously impose the death penalty. But if it does, I don't think there'll be an appellate issue. And I hope and pray if he does get the death penalty, he doesn't call me to be his appellate lawyer, because probably I'd have to do it because I'm so opposed to the death penalty. But I hope he doesn't call me. And he will almost certainly lose an appeal if it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court now has a majority in favor of the death penalty being constitutionally permissible. I had a long talk once with Justice Scalia about the death penalty, and he says he told me he was of mixed minds about it personally. As a Catholic, and he was a very religious Catholic, the Vatican is opposed to the death penalty, not as a matter of religious obligation, but as a matter of policy. They say unless it's the only alternative, it should not be imposed, and every Catholic should think very hard before they support the death penalty. And Scalia said to me, I thought very hard, and I can't say I'm opposed to the death penalty. But he said, my own views of the death penalty are utterly irrelevant, because the only issue is whether or not it's constitutional. I actually argued a death penalty case in front of Justice Scalia. I was the lawyer for two young boys who were on death row for having murdered a whole family of people. They didn't fire a shot. Their father fired the shots. Father had sent them away. There's a movie about it called Death in the Family. And I was their lawyer, and I won the case. And I saved their lives, and they were not executed. They're still in prison to this day. They're now probably, they were kids when I defended them. When the murders occurred, they were, I think, 18, 19 or something like that. They're now probably in their 50s, and they're still in prison. And there have been efforts to try to get parole, probation, some sort of conditional release. I don't know if that's going to happen at all. So very ambivalent about the death penalty for Mangione. He deserves it. Do we deserve it? Do we deserve to have him have the death penalty? They'll make a hero out of him. It'll cost a fortune because he'll litigate up and down the kazoo. And also, by the way, his chances of getting a reversal on appeal on the merits of the case go up tremendously if he gets the death penalty. Judges simply look harder for errors if there's a death penalty involved. In fact, death cases in the Supreme Court, when I was a clerk at least, I think it's still true, are marked differently. When the petitions come around to the justices, to the law clerks first, you have a special red mark if it's a death penalty case. And so, as a law clerk, we look much harder for reversible error if there was a death penalty. But again, I want to make an analogy to Khalil here, the thug Hamas guy who is in the process of being deported. I defend his free speech rights to say horrible things about Israel. If he were an American citizen, I would, by the way. This is a very different standard if he's a green card holder, a visa holder. But I certainly condemn everything he says and everything he does. I would say similar things about Luigi Mangione. I would defend him against the death penalty if I were his lawyer. But I can't defend what he did. I can't support a law that would honor him, or I can't support his picture being hung in people's dormitories, as apparently has happened, or T-shirts being made. So, my view is I understand Pam Bondi seeking the death penalty. She's the Attorney General. She supports the death penalty. And if there were ever a case for the death penalty, this is the case for the death penalty. I do not understand anybody in California trying to honor him or use his name on bills. And it reflects the deep division in our country. If you have people in our country who are so divided that some people want to execute him and other people want to honor him, same person, same crime. No doubt about the facts of the case. Everybody knows the facts of the case. Everybody has all the evidence. This is not one of these cases where it's where you have to assume that maybe they got the wrong person. No, they didn't get the wrong person. He's not going to raise a defense of insanity. He's probably going to raise a defense of justifiable homicide, and he's going to lose on that. He won't even get an instruction on that. It's not justifiable to kill somebody because they're the head of a company that you don't like. So he'll lose. Don't know whether he'll get the death penalty. If he gets the death penalty will be upheld. Those are my predictions. Now, again, I don't know all the facts about his own background, whether there are arguments that can be made in mitigation that might cause a court to throw out the death penalty. I don't know of any, so I'll make a prediction. My prediction is he's going to be convicted. Don't know whether he gets the death penalty, but if he gets the death penalty will be affirmed, if not by the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, certainly by the Supreme Court of the United States. So in about 2 or 3 years, when this all comes to pass, call me out if I'm wrong. I don't think I will be wrong. Okay, so let's turn to letters. So this is a good one. A lot of letters about third term, about whether the president should run for a third term. I would say the overwhelming consensus was that regardless of whether there's a legal way for him to run, A, he's not going to run for a third term, and B, he shouldn't run for a third term, because the spirit of the Constitution, if not the exact letter of every one of the amendments, is against it. But this is a good one. Listen to this one. This might persuade some of you to change your mind. Be careful what you ask for. If Trump can serve 3 terms, then why couldn't Barack Obama run for a third term? Wouldn't that be an interesting matchup? Donald Trump versus Barack Obama. both having served 2 terms. Who would win that contest if they were allowed to run? If this were 10 years ago, I think there'd be a good chance that Barack Obama, I think he's lost his luster. I would not vote for him. I can tell you that. I would not vote for Barack Obama under any circumstances, even if it was a first term or a second term. I did vote for him both times. I regretted the second time I voted for him because he lied to me. And he stabbed Israel in the back after promising me he wouldn't do it. But it's interesting because if you say a person can run 3 times and you want Trump to run 3 times, you have to remember what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And you're going to get a Democrat who's going to be a populist and is going to want to run too. So that's why we have amendments, which are so hard to amend. So we're not going to see a change in that amendment. Okay. This is an interesting one. Professor, Judge Boasberg has been given his 4th Trump-related case. The latest case involves the lawsuit over Signal Chat. This seems to belie random case assignment, which is supposed to be the norm. It's not supposed to be the norm. It's the law. Now, there's an exception. If there are related cases, the chief judge can say, all right, this guy's been a judge. This is a related case. It's just like it. Some of the same facts, some of the same law. These are not related cases. So you have to really ask yourself, has the random system been operating? I'd love to see somebody do, maybe one of the viewers can do it, a statistical analysis as to how likely it is that a judge picked from a wheel randomly with a group of judges in the dozens would get 4 Trump-related cases in a row if it were purely random. I'd like to see the statistics on that and the data on that. And I'm sure the lawyers in the case are looking at that. And if there is a basis for a challenge, would probably challenge it. I love Trump, and I'm happy he's in office, but I would not want him to play these games with the Constitution to serve another term. I believe the majority of the country would not support these efforts. J.D. Vance has already shown he can be tough and diplomatic, very intelligent and educated. He will probably be the top contender for 28. I have great confidence in him already. Okay, I haven't made a choice, obviously, for 28. I'll be 90 years old, so maybe my wife will have to walk me to the polls and vote for me, but I hope I'll still be around, be able to make my choice. But I'll make it based on what I think is best for the country, not based on party affiliations. Okay, a number of letters about the fact that people have talked about me possibly being a candidate for our U.S. representative to the United Nations. I'm not going to be picked. He's already apparently made his pick, the former ambassador to Germany, who would be the first gay ambassador to the United Nations. Apparently, he's very good. I don't know him at all. The other name that was in the mix and mentioned by Trump himself was David Friedman, who'd be terrific. He was a great ambassador to Israel, and people have proposed me as well, but I'm not gonna get it. But here's a letter. If you actually would do it, it would be 100% worth it and the best television ever. If the ambassador to UN requires congressional hearing, it does, a Senate hearing. It would be better and more heated than the Bork, Kavanaugh, and Thomas hearings combined. Whew. And hearing you address and speak at the UN would be explosive. Would love it. Ain't gonna happen. It's, as I said, I think the only job I would ever consider taking in government at my age, and also UN is down the block from me. I wouldn't even have to commute to work, just walk out the door and I'd be there. But he's going to pick somebody else, and I hope he picks somebody who's very, very good. And that person does have to be confirmed by the United States Senate. Stefanik would have been confirmed over a lot of Democratic objection. And it's even conceivable she might come back if the Republicans secure an overwhelming majority in the House. Then she could easily leave the House and become the U.S. representative to the UN. Again, that's off sometime, so we don't know. And then another one, I wish you could serve at the UN. That's not going to happen. Oh, this is one related to that. I like Mike Huckabee, but Alan would have made a great ambassador of the United States to Israel. I've mentioned this before, I think. I was offered to become an ambassador to the United Nations, but not by the United States. I was offered it by Benjamin Netanyahu when he was Prime Minister of Israel. He had his person come to see me, offered me the job. I would be Israel's representative to the United Nations. I would not have to give up my American citizenship, but I would have to take Israeli citizenship. And I decided I couldn't do it. I'm an American, and I don't want to have any kind of suspicion, accusations, unconscious, conscious of dual loyalties at all. I want to always be an American, and so I didn't get it. I didn't take it. I was offered it. I didn't take it. Mike Huckabee is going to be a great ambassador to Israel. He's been there many times. I'm looking forward to visiting him in Jerusalem, as I visited his predecessor, David Friedman. They were both incredibly good ambassadors. Huckabee will be a great ambassador. I'm looking forward to him getting confirmed by the Senate. The appointed procedure scenario, the one that I talked about, that he would become either Speaker of the House or President pro temp of the Senate or Secretary of State or Secretary of Treasury, and then be appointed president. The appointed president scenario would be a disastrous move for our country. I love Trump, but, and then he has 3 dots. Okay, final question. This is an interesting one. It's not a question, it's really a statement. When I think of how much I used to disagree with Professor Dershowitz back when I was in school, and then I think of how much less frequently I disagree with him now, it starts me pondering which has changed more, the professor, me, the insanity level of the world, or me. Well, I have to tell you, I am boringly consistent. I haven't changed. I have been a libertarian. I have been a constitutionalist. I have been a nonpartisan supporter of what I think is right for all those years. So I think it's the world outside that's changed. I mean, I do really take very much to heart what Ronald Reagan said when he said, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. And the Democratic Party has left me, and the left was never really a leftist, but the left has left me. I was a centrist Democrat. I am now a centrist independent and libertarian, and I'll continue to do that. I guess we do have time for one more question, and it's a provocative one. Okay. I feel that our founders made a mistake by not requiring Congress and the judges to be native born like the president. I don't agree at all. First of all, I think they did make a mistake. I don't think that the president should have to be native born. If you have been in this country for 50 years and you fought in the military and you've shown your allegiance to this country in every possible way, it doesn't matter where you were born. It's kind of nativism. So, and we've had great members of Congress and great justices of the Supreme Court and great secretaries of state. Henry Kissinger wasn't born in the United States. Ted Cruz wasn't born in the United States. Felix Frankfurter wasn't born in the United States. Yo-Yo Ma, the great cellist, wasn't born in the United States. I don't think you have to be born in the United States to be an American patriot. Of course, all the founding fathers were born in Great Britain, but there was an exception under the Constitution for that, because Alexander Hamilton wasn't even born in England. He was born on a small island in the Caribbean. So where you were born shouldn't matter. I think where your heart is, where your allegiances are. You could be born in the United States and be a traitor, and you can be born in Russia and be the most loyal person imaginable. I think about my grandmother. My grandmother was born a little shtetl in Poland at the age of like 15, 16. She came to the United States to marry her sister's husband, because her sister died in childbirth, and there had been a tradition among Orthodox Jews of that background. If that happened, the younger sister comes and marries and brings up the children. My grandmother was the most patriotic woman imaginable. I mean, she hardly was able to speak English, but she took us to the Statue of Liberty and made us sing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star Spangled Banner, including the second stanza of the Star Spangled Banner. I thought of my grandmother today because I flew in today from Florida to New York, and of course you fly over the Statue of Liberty. And I looked out of my window, and there was the Statue of Liberty, and a tear came to my eyes because, you know, immigrants made this country. Legal immigrants made this country better than it was. It was a great country before, but it was an even greater country when we started taking people from all over the world. And so much of our success, medically, scientifically, educationally, in so many ways, has been a function of our immigration policy. So, 3 cheers for legal immigrants, but not for illegal immigrants, and not for immigrants who come here and exploit our system and commit crimes. So we have to sharply distinguish between immigration, which is good for the country, and an unlawful invasion, which is happening and has happened in many parts of the world. And so let's get it straight. I will see you tomorrow.